I'm a mob boss, and I'm pregnant. The subordinate I punish most ruthlessly by day is the same man who pins me down at night, holding my hips and driving me to the breaking point. But the baby can't live without me. So I'm afraid you'll have to tough it out a little longer, my love. After everyone had given me their reports, I sat by the floor-to-ceiling window, lit a cigarette, and casually asked one more thing. So where's Eric? At the mention of his name, the heads of my various divisions just looked at each other. Only one of my guys, a quick thinker, spoke up. Boss, didn't you say last week to tell Eric to get lost and stay out of your sight? That unless he dropped dead somewhere, he didn't need to report back to you? I held my cigarette, slowly blowing out a calm ring of smoke. So, did he drop dead somewhere? The guy wiped away sweat that wasn't there. I hear he hasn't, no. He nodded and gestured to a lower-level guy, whispering an order. Go find out where Eric is and what he's doing. Now, the kid was fast. The news came back in minutes. Eric's in a VIP room at the club. The guys with him say he ordered 8 male dancers and 3 bottles of whiskey. 8 dancers and 3 bottles of whiskey. He's really living it up out there, isn't he? I remembered my doctor telling me to cut back on smoking. I glanced down at my own slightly rounded stomach. Then I calmly raised my hand and crushed the cigarette to bits. From now on, even if he dies, you don't need to tell me. After everyone had left, I lay down on the soft bed in my bedroom. Eric was originally just an insignificant guy in my crew. At first, I just admired his skills, so I promoted him to work directly for me. He was efficient and smooth with people, so I trusted him completely. What I didn't expect was for him to climb into my bed and force himself on me while I was weak. Although, to be fair, I was the one who bit his lip and wouldn't let him leave. But that one time was all it took. I got pregnant. When I was young, a relative involved in organized crime overseas grabbed me and used me in body modification experiments. It gradually changed my body in ways that aren't normal. I have regular periods of weakness, and I can get pregnant. These effects became even more pronounced after I conceived. Even when Eric was pushing me to my limits in bed, my body became intensely dependent on him. But the man is just too damn rough. Last week, after he'd pushed me past my breaking point, I kicked him all the way back down to the lowest rung of the organization. I haven't seen him for a week since. I curled up on the bed, my body aching. A thin layer of sweat dampened the small of my back. Finally, at 3 a.m., I got in the car. I looked at my yawning driver. The club. Let's go. A light rain was falling. The driver opened my door. We're here, Mr. Cole. I followed the directions from my phone and quickly found Eric's private room. His voice was loud and clear from inside. You lost. Pay up. Your turn to strip. Hearing how much fun he was having, I sneered and ordered my driver. Kick the door in. The door flew open with a bang. The 8 male dancers, plus Eric, all whipped their heads toward me. They were squatting on a few scattered stools, still holding their unfinished hands of cards. Eric was the only one fully dressed. Julian, listen to me. I looked down at him, my dark eyes calm, my voice flat. Playing cards with 8 male dancers? You really know how to live. I grabbed him by the collar. He struggled and tried to soothe me, attempting to cover my hand with his big palm. Boss, don't be angry. You're pregnant. He glanced down at my stomach, then bit his lip with a wicked grin. If you stress the baby over a nobody like me, its other father will be very upset. Before he could finish, a kick sent him flying. He didn't even get mad, just caught his breath. Boss, as long as it helps you blow off steam. You kicking me like this, I get off on it, too. I stepped between his legs, asserting my dominance. My gaze was cold as I looked down at him. I pressed the taser whip I always carry to his chin. You get off on it, do you? My long fingers flicked on the electric current. I tapped his cheek with the whip and laughed coldly. I've got ways to make it even more thrilling. Want to try? Eric's expression froze for a second. Then, shamelessly, he wrapped his arms around my leg. Boss, not that. It'll kill me. If I'm fried to a crisp, what are you going to use tonight? Eric's dirty talk was always tasteless. Worse than his performance in bed, you could say. So, I automatically filtered it out as trash. I shot a cold look around the room. The dancers were trembling under my gaze. My eyes finally settled back on him. Are you done playing? Or should I wait for you? Eric scrambled to his feet, dusting himself off. Done. This was just a friendly game. I wouldn't dare hold up your business, boss. Seeing that Eric was ready to follow, I opened a black umbrella and started walking out. He ran to catch up. Boss, I haven't paid yet. I pressed my lips together and paused for a moment. Then I tossed my black card to the driver. He took it to settle the bill. The night air was cool. I opened the car door and looked down at Eric. You knew I would come? Under my icy stare, he looked up at me without fear. He smiled softly. Of course. The rain began to let up. I followed his gaze down to his hand as it brazenly traced the line of my zipper. He bit my ear, his hot breath a slow, deliberate tease. Boss, I know your body better than you do. And it told me it missed me. The moment we got home, he had me pinned to the bed, and I was gasping for breath. Eric knew my body all too well. I'm not exactly easygoing in bed, but he always found a way to make me tolerate his transgressions, time and time again. Afterward, I struggled to sit up. I habitually lit a cigarette to soothe my nerves. Eric sat up too. Boss, you should smoke less. The light in the room was dim. On his pale, muscular forearm, I saw the faint outline of a tattoo. August 13th. I raised my hand and pressed the lit end of my cigarette into his skin. The flesh sizzled, but Eric didn't make a sound. Only when the cigarette was out did he whine, almost like a spoiled child. Ow, boss, you hurt me. My gaze was cold, my voice indifferent. Good. As long as you can remember the pain. Eric's smile vanished. He rested his head on my stomach, listening to the faint heartbeat inside. Boss, he asked, do you love me? I didn't even look up. If it weren't for this child, I would have killed you. Suddenly, a fierce look crossed his face. He pushed me back down onto the bed. The hand holding my cigarette froze. I watched him move, my pupils losing focus. Eric, you. A tremor of pleasure shot up from the base of my spine, spreading through my entire body. With a jolt, the overwhelming sensation washed away all conscious thought. Toward the end, I was on the verge of breaking. My fingers curled unconsciously into the bedsheets. I wanted to kick Eric off the bed but had no strength left. I could only grit my teeth and tremble out the words. Eric, get the hell off me. He supported my waist, cooing at me as if to comfort me. Boss, don't say things you don't mean. The baby can't live without me. He knew I was powerless against him right now. He grew bolder, nibbling on my earlobe. So I'm afraid you'll have to tough it out a little longer, boss. The night was long, destined to be sleepless. Eric might be useless in other ways, but his stamina was incredible. He didn't let me sleep until noon. It was already dusk when I finally woke up. I rubbed my aching back and walked to the window to answer a call. It was a message from overseas. Mr. Cole, regarding the abortion you inquired about a few months ago, we've found the best specialist abroad. We'll arrange an examination for you as soon as possible. My expression darkened. How long will that take? The person on the other end paused. About a week. I nodded slightly. Make it fast. The Cole family originally made its fortune in the precious gems trade. After the elders in my family passed away, the business declined. So I pivoted to finance. But with my family's legacy, it was only natural that I'd want to get back into the gem trade and take a piece of the pie. Right now, the top player in the industry is a man named Mr. Morgan. If you want to make it in gems, you have to go through him. Mr. Morgan was an old fox. He lit a cigarette and blew out a puff of smoke. Julian, my boy, I really can't cede any ground to you on this deal. You've already taken so much business in this town. It doesn't pay to be too greedy. Business is always a push and pull. We're all sharks in this tank, we all know the game. I curved my lips into a faint, humorless smile. Mr. Morgan, my guys have to eat too. I heard you recently took on a massive contract, so big you probably can't handle it alone. It just so happens my people have extensive networks. A mutually beneficial partnership helping you land this deal, wouldn't that be for the best? Mr. Morgan didn't mince words. My boy, given our relationship, I'll be direct. With these big deals, how they're divided, who gets the biggest share, the circle has its own rules. You coming in and demanding the lion's share, well, that's breaking the rules. How about this? Out of respect for my friendship with your parents, I'll give you 10%. If you do well, you can consider yourself established in this circle for the future. A 10% concession was generous. I signed the contract. But then Mr. Morgan brought up another topic. Speaking of which, Julian, my son has been working under you recently. I haven't seen him home in a while. Any idea how he's doing? I froze for a second. Your son? Who's that? Mr. Morgan said a name I knew all too well. Eric Morgan. I struggled to contain the storm raging inside me. At the same time, I let my gaze darken imperceptibly. Funny you should mention him. I know your son quite well. In fact, I brought him with me today. I gave a slight wave of my hand. A sharp subordinate quickly brought Eric in. When Eric came in, he knew what was happening. He crisply called out, "Dad." Mr. Morgan's smile was faint but full of meaning. It seems Mr. Cole thinks quite highly of you. To keep you by his side and mentor you. Does he? I sneered internally, looking at the fine son he'd raised. I don't just keep him by my side. He dragged me into his bed. Mr. Morgan casually reached for another cigarette. Eric saw this and stepped forward to stop him. Dad, didn't you say your throat was bothering you these past few days? You should smoke less. Don't ruin your health. Mr. Morgan raised an eyebrow in surprise. But he put out the cigarette as his son suggested. It seems Mr. Cole has trained my boy well. At home, he never gave a damn about my health. I looked down and smiled, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. Mr. Morgan, if there's nothing else, I won't take up any more of your time. As I stood up, Mr. Morgan finally noticed my stomach. Judging by its size, he was genuinely shocked. Mr. Cole, that belly, have you put on weight? Ha, I let out a cold laugh. Then, under Eric's somewhat hopeful gaze, I spoke slowly, gesturing to my stomach. Yes, your son stressed me out so much that I grew a tumor here. I don't have long to live. When I left, Eric chased after me. Boss, let me explain. Surrounded by my men, I actually stopped. I watched him run up and waited for his explanation. Eric spoke quickly. Boss, it's not what you think. I'm truly loyal to you. I don't care about my dad's business at all. I cut him off calmly. Eric, even your identity is fake. Is anything about you real? Eric pressed his hand to my stomach. My feelings for you are real. Wanting to sleep with you is real. And wanting to meet our child is real, too. My eyes grew cold. I was unmoved. Eric, you know my rules. I don't like being lied to. My organization is too small to house a giant like you. Eric knew I meant what I said. He immediately sat down and hugged my legs. Boss, I'm not leaving. Even if you send me to a mine in Africa, I won't go. Seeing Eric clutching my sleeve, making a huge scene in public, I turned to my personal assistant. Do I own any mines? The assistant, who now knew Eric was the Morgan heir, actually checked my assets, then spoke politely to both of us. Boss, you do have one. But it's not in Africa as Mr. Morgan hoped. It's in South America. I'm afraid it might not meet your and Mr. Morgan's requirements. TSK, I turned back to Eric and asked with genuine sincerity, is South America okay? Eric looked devastated. No, it's not okay, boss. This six-pack, this body I work on every day at the gym, you're not going to enjoy it? You're going to send it to a mine? Isn't that a waste? He had a point. Too bad I don't deal in illegal organ trafficking. I gave Eric a regretful look, which seemed to unnerve him. What a waste of a good body. A specialist brought medical equipment to my home to perform the necessary checkup. Eric stayed by my side the whole time. The doctor, who had flown in from abroad, spoke fluent English. My assistant translated for me. Mr. Cole, the fetus is developing well. If you've decided to proceed with the termination, it should go smoothly. I didn't say anything. I just stared out the window, watching Eric gaze at the little figure on the ultrasound screen, completely smitten. I wanted a cigarette, but then I remembered I was quitting. I just fidgeted with my fingers in frustration. The doctor spoke up beside me. Mr. Cole, if you've decided to terminate from an ethical standpoint, the child's other biological father has a right to know. I paused, silent for a long moment. Finally, I spoke slowly. I know. I'll find a chance to tell him. Another nightmare. I was back in that cold laboratory. A young, helpless me watched doctors come and go. I didn't understand the language, so I had no idea what they were saying. All I knew were the ice-cold needles they pushed into my body, making me feel like I was on fire. I wanted to scream for help, but no one came. All I heard was the scratching of pens on paper recording data. Experimental data colder than any human heart. Until finally, someone kicked down the door. He rescued me from the lab. By then, I was so weak that all I had left was a faint sense of hearing. But what I heard was the most beautiful sound in the world. A strong arm pulled me into an embrace. He covered my eyes, pulled out the 4 and said, "Little master, I've come to take you home." I snapped my eyes open to see Eric. He was holding me, hanging precariously from a window ledge. Seeing I was awake, he gave me a reassuring smile. "Boss, you're finally awake." I stared at him with cold eyes. "What are you doing?" Eric looked completely bewildered. "Boss, can't you see? There's a fire." Only then did I look up. My pupils reflected a sky full of flames. The bedroom I normally slept in was already engulfed. And I hadn't even noticed. A chill ran down my spine. Eric landed steadily on the ground, still holding me. It was only then that I saw the massive burns on his back. The flesh was charred and raw, bone visible in places. But Eric showed no sign of pain. The moment we were on the ground, before he could even speak, medics rushed him away to treat his burns. I was about to follow when one of my men reported to me, "Boss, Mr. Davis is here." I saw the elderly man being supported by others. I immediately walked over and bowed my head respectfully. "Mr. Davis." Mr. Davis's eyesight was failing. He had to touch my arm to be sure. "Little master, are you all right?" "Nothing happened. Did it?" I helped him to a seat. "It's nothing. Just a small fire." I wasn't hurt. Only then did Mr. Davis nod, relieved. "That young man who saved you has some real skill. To see you surrounded by such capable people, I can finally rest easy. I've done right by your parents' memory." My throat tightened. "Mr. Davis, don't say that. You'll live for a long, long time." Mr. Davis just smiled gently and said no more. The fire wasn't an accident. It was set by someone in the gem trade. That's how it is in our line of work. One misstep and it could cost you your life. When I went to see Eric, he was carefully pressing his head against my stomach. He asked with concern, "He hasn't been bothering you, has he, boss?" I looked away, uneasy. No, it was strange, actually. This child was incredibly well behaved. No morning sickness when I first got pregnant. And now that I was further along, he didn't fuss. Eric truly adored this child. He couldn't get enough of being close to him. This wasn't a good thing. I couldn't let him get attached. I had to make a clean break. As I was leaving Eric's hospital room, I ran into a girl who was there to visit him. She spoke to me in a friendly tone. "You must be Mr. Cole, right?" I raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. The girl's smile was generous and gentle. "Eric and I are childhood sweethearts. Our families have met. If you need to get in touch with Eric in the future, you can go through me." I didn't say anything, which made the atmosphere awkward. On a strange impulse, I suddenly asked her, "Does August 13th have any special meaning?" The girl was first surprised, then delighted. "Did Eric tell you? August 13th is my birthday." My smile faded. I gave her a polite, gentlemanly nod. Then I left the hospital with my men. After returning home, I made a call. When it connected, I got straight to the point. "I'm pregnant." Mr. Morgan choked on the other end. I knew he'd misunderstand, so I added, "It's your son's." Mr. Morgan was even more confused. "Julian, did you hit your head? You're a man. How are you pregnant?" I couldn't be bothered to explain. I don't want to get into the details. "Anyway, Mr. Morgan, I just need you to tell Eric that I don't plan on keeping this child. And please control your son. Starting today, I will not see him again." What I said to Mr. Morgan must have worked. Eric didn't show up. But what did come was my period of weakness. My body trembled, and all I could do was curl up in a piece of clothing Eric had left behind, desperately trying to find comfort in his faint, familiar scent. But it wasn't a long-term solution. I was visibly losing weight. The doctor said that, in my current condition, an abortion was impossible. I had to see Eric as soon as possible, even if it meant calling him over just so he could watch his own child be forcibly removed from my body. I didn't want to be that cruel, but I had no other choice. I never expected him to come to me first. While I was handling business, he burst in, taking down 2 of my best guards at the door without a second thought. His face was bruised. It was clear Mr. Morgan had been rough with him. I knew what he was here to ask. I calmly poured him a cup of tea. But Eric was in no mood for tea. He slammed the abortion appointment form on my desk. His eyes were red as he questioned me. "Julian, what the hell is this? You're getting rid of our child?" I leaned back in my leather chair and looked up at him nonchalantly. "Yes, I don't want it." The last bit of light in Eric's eyes died. He slammed his hands on my armrests and demanded, "Why?" I didn't want to get into it with him. "Because I don't. It's my child. If I don't want it, do I need to give you a reason?" Eric's eyes suddenly turned red. "Julian, you can't get rid of him." He dropped to his knees, pressing his hands to my stomach. His touch was firm yet reverent, over and over again. "Boss, I know you hate me. You hate that I climbed into your bed. But he's not just my child. He's your child too. You can't get rid of him just because of me. Okay?" The baby in my belly seemed to sense him, kicking in response to his touch. I watched him, my voice unervingly calm. "Eric, I think you've misunderstood something. From the very beginning, I never wanted him." Eric looked at me in disbelief. "What did you say?" He suddenly went wild, pinning me in the chair and kissing me forcefully, his words muffled and broken. Why, how can you be so guilt-free, so at ease with getting rid of this child? He's been in your belly for so long. He's so good, he's never caused you any trouble. The last time I saw him, he was already sucking his thumb. Do you have any idea how much I've been looking forward to this child's arrival? The days you kicked me out, I couldn't sleep, terrified that you'd call and I'd miss it. I admit it, I stole this child from you when you were weak. I know you don't like me, but you can't be this cruel to me. I'm begging you." Eric's voice broke into a sob. He was like a stray dog abandoned by its master. He bit my lip until it bled, but I was numb to the pain. My dark, cold eyes remained fixed on his, without a ripple of emotion. It was as if I was born this way, alone, cold-blooded, and heartless. After a long time, I heard myself let out a soft sigh. "Eric, do you know what it would take for this child to be born? The doctors said that since I don't have a uterus, they would have to cut me open, live. To ensure the baby's survival, it would have to be done without any anesthesia. If the baby is born, the father's survival rate is less than 10%. I felt the warmth drain from the fingers on my stomach. Eric's eyes were red as he slowly let go. "Boss, why didn't you tell me?" I looked up at him, my gaze cold. It was hard to say what emotion was in my dark eyes, because whether I told you or not, the result would be the same. I avoided his gaze, looking out the window with a flat tone. "Eric, if you really want a child, go find a woman to have one with. As for the one in my belly, just pretend he never existed. Okay?" Eric just stared, his eyes red, as he slowly removed his hands from my stomach. "Boss, he's still alive. Let me touch him one more time. After that, I'll go with you to have it terminated." My men cleaned house in the gem market. Mr. Morgan was furious with my methods, but there was nothing he could do. He could only turn a blind eye. I had some of the gem dealers brought to me. They were indignant. "Julian, all that happened was one of your men got burned. Even by the rules of the street, that's settled with a replacement or some cash. Why blow things out of proportion?" I calmly lowered my eyes, my tone anything but polite. "Yes, just one of my men. But he's my man. You make a move on my turf, on my people, did you get my permission? His life is mine to control. When you mess with my people, you're slapping me in the face." The dealers looked at each other. Finally, one spoke up loudly. "Julian, what do you want?" You have to be reasonable. The room was dimly lit. I picked up a candlestick. The flame flickered, dripping wax. My smile was ice cold. Unfortunately, the one thing I'm not good at is being reasonable. And I'm fiercely protective of my own. I don't want much. I just want you all to have a taste of hot wax. The room instantly filled with screams. One man cursed Julian. No wonder they say you're cursed, that you bring bad luck to everyone around you. You'll never keep a single family member in your life. You're a plague, and you'll die alone. I gave him a detached glance. The crushing coldness of my stare silenced him. But just as I walked out of the room, one of my guys reported to me. Boss, my condolences. Just now, Mr. Davis passed away. I told my private doctor, Dr. Evans. I want to keep this child. You're insane. Dr. Evans looked at me in disbelief, a look of utter exasperation on his face. You're gonna risk your life just to give Eric a kid? It's not for Eric. I lowered my gaze. I was far enough along now that the movements were obvious. I could clearly feel the child growing, little by little. Mr. Davis is dead now, too. In this world, this child is the only family I have left. I don't want to lose the only one I have. My words made Dr. Evans furious. Listen to me, Cole. If you want to die, go die on your own time. Don't ruin my reputation. How many times have I dragged you back from the brink? It wasn't so you could throw your life away like this. If you're going to treat your body like this, we're done. I smoothly signed my name a few times and handed him a piece of paper. Fine. I'll settle your salary for this month and write you a letter of recommendation. Dr. Evans slammed the paper on the table. Julian, did the pregnancy go to your head? Or did you just catch whatever stupid bug that Eric kid has? Is that what you think I meant? What I mean is, if you want to have this baby, current medical technology can't do it. So what's your plan? I thought for a moment in silence. Then I remembered someone I hadn't thought about in a long time. Hasn't James been pretty free lately? In an underground lab somewhere in the Americas, various instruments and pieces of equipment were smashed to pieces. Several blue-eyed foreigners were tied up by their wrists. I wore a trench coat that hid my pregnant stomach. I looked down, toying with the whip in my hand. Mr. James, long time no see. James was tied to a chair, gritting his teeth. Yeah, long time no see you. Every time you show up, Cole, it's bad news. I already helped you put your uncle away, the modification experiments are shut down, what more do you want? My tone was mild and even, not at all what you'd expect from someone talking to a man tied to a chair. Mr. James, I just wanted to ask, if a modified human body becomes pregnant, other than an unanesthetized C-section, are there any other delivery methods with a higher success rate? At my words, James started cursing even more. We do human modification, not life sciences. We're a black site clinic, you get it? A black site clinic. You need prenatal care, you don't come to us, you go to a hospital. But no, you people keep showing up here one after another. My equipment has been smashed twice now. Is there any justice in the world? James's words made my heart sink. At that moment, the child in my belly stirred, giving my stomach a kick. He was telling me he was healthy, that he wanted to live. Suddenly, a thought struck me, and I looked up. You said someone else came here? Actually, even if James hadn't said it, I could have guessed. The person who came before me was Eric. According to James, Eric was even more of a barbarian than I was. When he found out James couldn't help, he smashed several high-precision instruments from the old experiments. I let my face fall, my expression unreadable. The pressure in the room dropped. Didn't you say this equipment was all destroyed? James realized he'd slipped up, but it was too late to take it back. He could only answer honestly. Mr. Cole, a few of the expensive ones are still here. This level of high-precision machinery is incredibly expensive. I was planning to sell them for cash after the heat died down. I loosened my cuffs and gave a cool order. Oh, there are still a few left? Smash them all. As I was leaving, James kicked the wall in frustration, only to hop around in pain from the impact. A couple of bandits from the east. Ow. Although James was no help, the team of specialists came up with a plan. An artificial gestational sac with a success rate of up to 80%. Eric grilled the team for a long time. The specialists repeatedly assured him that although the procedure wasn't exactly standard, there were clinical precedents. As long as the sac could be formed, the delivery would be successful. Eric wrapped his arms around my waist, his cheek pressed against my stomach. Listen up, little guy. When the time comes, you come out quick. If you dare give your Papa Julian a hard time, I'll strangle you myself, you little brat. I felt the baby shrink in my stomach as if in fear. I lowered my gaze, my expression softening slightly. I thought you loved this child more than anything? Why are you scaring him? Eric looked up at me, his eyes shining. Boss, in my heart, you're the most important. I was afraid you'd get rid of the baby because I was afraid you hated me so much you'd get rid of him too. And then I'd have no chance with you at all. I raised an eyebrow slightly. You might not have a chance now, either. Eric acted as if he hadn't heard me. He bent down and kissed my stomach, sending a shiver through my body. I fought back the discomfort and turned to ask the doctor, "What's the due date?" The doctor checked the calendar, then informed me, "Mr. Cole, it's August 13th. When we went to see Mr. Morgan, Eric announced loudly before we even stepped through the door, "Dad, I brought your son-in-law home." Mr. Morgan snorted. "Ha, you're quick to claim him. Does Julian even want you? Don't be surprised if he keeps the baby and kicks you to the curb." I followed Eric in and said calmly, "Dad." He practically shuddered and had to down a glass of wine to steady his nerves. Honestly, it wasn't that I was quick to accept. It was that Eric had told me Mr. Morgan had a massive collection of treasures, each one a priceless, one-of-a-kind piece, just waiting for Eric to settle down and pass them on to the next generation. So Eric decided to strike while the iron was hot. "Dad, the boss has accepted. Come on, show some appreciation." A vein pulsed in Mr. Morgan's forehead. "If Mr. Cole wouldn't mind, I have some autographed calligraphy from famous artists in my collection." Eric cut him off. "Dad, a few pieces of calligraphy aren't enough. I'm marrying into the Cole family. If my dowry isn't impressive enough, what if I get bullied in the future?" Mr. Morgan forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Then what do you want?" At this, Eric lit up. "Fine wine, rare teas, diamonds, and sports cars. Dad, those 2 purebred horses you had air freighted from Europe after breeding them are pretty nice too. For the baby's 1-month celebration, we can bring out that family heirloom jade carving." Watching Mr. Morgan's face get darker and darker, I couldn't help but let out a small laugh to lighten the mood. Ahem, it seems Mr. Morgan has quite a wide range of hobbies. Mr. Morgan finally lost it, dropping all pretense of civility. "Eric, whose side are you on?" Eric struck a righteous pose. "In our world, loyalty comes before blood. Of course, I follow the boss's lead. And don't forget the gift for the kid's 18th birthday, Dad. I saw those 2 giant jade Buddhas you bought at auction last year. They'd be perfect for the kid. And don't worry about us not being able to carry it all. I already called 3 moving companies on the way here. By the time we left, the Morgan house was practically empty. Mr. Morgan was heartbroken. A pair of heartless crooks. In all my years, I've never seen a home invasion this ruthless. Even with the artificial gestational sac, giving birth to Leo was agony. Little Leo was also more fragile than other babies. The doctor said we'd have to be extra careful and run several genetic screenings to prevent any future defects. Eric held me and just cried. "Honey, that was too painful. We're never doing that again." Maybe it was the pregnancy brain, but my thought process was different from others. I gave him a complicated look. "So, you were originally planning on having me do this again?" Eric immediately backpedaled. "Ah, honey, that's not what I meant." He looked at me nervously, tears still in his eyes. "Boss, you're not really going to just keep the kid and get rid of me, are you?" I sized him up and snorted. Then I said coolly, "That depends on your future performance." "Hey, Eric, what are you doing getting on the bed?" I watched him climb over me. For some reason, my heart started to beat a little faster. Eric bit my ear. "See, honey, you're softening up, which means I can't let you get away. Honey, have you ever heard the saying?" My voice was hoarse. "What is it?" He leaned down and kissed my lips. "It's that every king needs a guard dog. Honey, you and I are fated to be tangled up for life." Epilogue. Many years later, Eric was in the kitchen cooking. I was on the sofa, reading the financial papers. Leo, with his little backpack on, tiptoed in through the door. I pushed up my gold-rimmed glasses, not even lifting my eyes. Leo, leave the midterm exams here. Leo had no choice but to watch my expression carefully. He pulled a few crumpled papers from his bag, smoothed them out, and pushed them toward me with a hesitant finger. English 70, Math 19, History 50. My wry, amused look eventually faded into an endless silence. Just as I was starting to wonder if a child born without a uterus might have developmental issues affecting his brain, Eric came out holding a spatula. He saw the disastrous test scores on the table. Leo, what is this garbage? I looked at Eric, my voice flat. Eric, I heard from Mr. Morgan yesterday that you failed a class in elementary school, got into a gang fight in middle school, and dyed your hair blonde in high school to be some kind of delinquent. Eric laughed awkwardly. That was just to be a better enforcer for you, honey. Besides, in our line of work, you don't find a lot of Rhodes Scholars. I propped my head on my hand and gave him a half smile. I have a master's in finance from Columbia. And, if I remember correctly, so does Mr. Morgan. Eric was silent for a moment. Then he grabbed Leo by the collar. I may not be educated, but I know a thing or two about fighting. Honey, leave Leo's punishment to me. After Eric dragged Leo into the other room, 10 minutes passed with no sign of them. I put down my paper to see what those two were up to. I found Leo dangling from Eric's grip, his pants half pulled down, still struggling furiously. You can't hit me, Dad. If you hit me, I'll tell Papa Julian you stole a piece of the strawberry cake he bought. Eric smacked his butt. Leo, you dare tattle to your Papa Julian? Do you know what your dad is best at? Eric's voice dropped, taking on a menacing edge, silencing people. Leo was just a kid. He burst into tears with a loud wail. Eric looked up and saw me leaning against the doorframe, my gaze meeting his like a deep, still pool. Eric's playful smirk vanished instantly. He straightened up. Honey, I was just trying to scare him. But clearly it was too late for excuses. I opened my lips slightly and mouthed two words at him. Strawberry cake. Eric's voice cracked. I was wrong, honey. I had just turned to go back to the bedroom when someone pushed me from behind, sending me tumbling onto the bed. I looked up at him, my voice a little hoarse. Eric kissed my earlobe, long and slow. He watched as my body grew tense. I know you're in your weak period. It must be hard to hold back, right? Wait. Don't push me away. I won't touch you this time. But, honey, you have to at least let me hold you, just to quench my thirst. A few hours later, Eric was standing outside the door clutching a pillow, right next to Leo, who was facing the wall with his test scores. Leo shuffled over to make room for him. He said, gloating, you failed your test too. Dad? Eric's smile immediately faded, which sent a shiver of fear down Leo's spine. Leo, get back to studying. Your old man is getting old, and the boss's favor is fading. Your Papa Julian just hired a new, young, handsome face last week. If we don't work harder, we're both going to be kicked out on the street together.